The basic idea is this, is that there's a lot of focus in what we do on, oh boy, look at that car, that locomotive, it's detail perfect. Every rivet is in place. But the thing is, there are two sides to this. And Larry O can talk about reliability and actually having rolling stock that lets stuff get delivered to the customers on time in good shape. And the RIP track is the repair and place operation that railroads have where broken equipment is fixed up so it can continue to work. And I have been pushing along in the idea of what can be done to improve operational reliability rather than detail, truthfulness, how closely something follows the prototype. But the prototype is mostly interested in, does it work? Is it reliable? And I am going to be trying to present information and examples to whoever I can get to do things and learn how to do things to improve reliability of equipment. And some of you have seen this form, some of you have not. This check-in form is one of the tools that I offer to everybody, and providing a way to be more consistent in making sure that the things that need to be done, not to make sure it looks perfect as a prototype, but rather to make sure that when you use that piece of rolling stock, that it doesn't disappoint and let you down. There's another factor to this. It used to be, when we were young sprats, that all we did was you jammed the stuff together and you put it on the track and you went round and round and round. And even when we got to club operations, jamming stuff together and go roundy, roundy, round was a sort of the way we did things. And part of that was that the control systems and technology we had pretty much put people, an individual or a group of people would sit at the panel, and they would have toggle switches and knobs and stuff, and they would control the trains. And the operational possibilities were pretty limited. But DCC, walk around, radio, all this sort of stuff meant that we could interact a lot more with the railroad and with our rolling stock. And reliability of the rolling stock got to be more and more important, because nothing spoils the realism of operations than having to reach out, pick it up, turn it upside down, shake it, say some bad words, and put it back down, and knowing that it's probably going to derail again in another few minutes, or it's not going to couple up, or all the different things any of you have experienced. And so the requirements of rolling stock, beyond just, boy, that looks pretty, have really changed, I believe. And so I want to try to provide ways for people and clubs and groups to get to a point where they can rely upon their equipment to do the job. I'm not going to worry so much in this effort about the quality of the drives inside the locomotives. That's sort of a separate portion of this, but just basic rolling stock. And today, I'm just going to do a couple of demonstrations looking at this check-in form. The form was written during my time as a leader of the Coastal Valley Lines, the CVL Modular Group in Santa Rosa, California. And this form is, come on, there. Does everybody see the generic check-in form?
Yep.
Good. All right. So we're going to walk through this, and then you will see a display here of a bottom of a box car? Does everybody see that bottom of a box car?
No.
Oh, because I'm sharing, of course. Will, I guess what I can do is I can move in and out of it. Let's try this. Okay. Let's see now. This one here, spotlight for everyone. All right. Does folks, do you see a bottom of a boxcar?
Yep.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Yeah, this one is I'm going to be bringing up various pieces of equipment to highlight some of the points. This is going to be a once over. There's many other details underlying the work that I'm going to be showing here, but I'll be covering more of these things in more detail in the future. Now, I should remark that some of you have been at this a lot longer than I have and have more time in the hobby. So if this is completely boring to all of you and has no benefit, I can stop it. Or I can, and as I do this, by the way, feel free to pipe up and say, that's a bunch of BS. All you need to do is throw that away and put on this. Or say, yes, that works, but there's also this other way to do the job. All of those sort of comments and feedback are welcome in the way I'm doing this, because I know that there are indeed many ways to achieve the goal of operational reliability in our rolling stock. So before I move on, everybody comfortable with that? You good to go? Okay, I see some thumbs up. All right, so let's see if this works. So to the check-in form again. And the top part here is kind of obvious, but is particularly appropriate if you have a club setting or group setting, which is whose is it? When was it checked in? Then we have some basic information about the piece of rolling stock above the line, which helps just keep track. And for those who are administratively oriented, you can do a form and then file it for the car if you're so inclined. But over time, I found it wasn't really useful to do that as long as the rolling stock was being treated well and not being abused. But there's your identification section of the form.
Dave?
Yes, sir.
Can I just make one suggestion on unit type?
Yes.
Adopt a uniform standard of how to define the unit type, such as AAR card designation.
Okay. That's another, and by the way, this form is a what if or just an example. And so if for you or for anybody that the AAR card designation is a better identifier, you betcha.
Hey, Dave.
Yes, sir.
Dave, just a very short. Instead of, I love the piece of paper, by the way. I keep track or try to. I use car cards. Those, in my case, they're yellow. And on the back of the car card, I have this information. So it's always with the car, and there's not another piece of paper floating around.
Got it. Car card. Okay, so documenting it on the back of a car card. I will remark that in the glory days of the Coastal Valley lines, once a year, we would go through folks' cars and we would have a colored dot or a little colored sticker that we would put under the car that said that it had been rechecked. So you can institute periodic maintenance, if you will. That's not usually, as I understand it, and maybe Larry Osorio can comment on this, that rip track is only at need. There was not a periodic recheck from the rip track function, as I understand it, Larry?
I don't know for sure. I never worked on the rip track, so I don't know.
All right. Just picking on you because I know you had a position of responsibility.
But that does bring up one thing, though, is that perhaps you should put the date of last check on the form.
Okay. There's another way to keep track of how long it's been since the car was looked at.
Because I mean, I'm sure the AAR has, requirements for when certain pieces of equipment have to be checked.
Right. Well, now there's those two placards on the side of cars. They're black with white printing, and they get updated as the car is serviced, as I understand it. Anybody else have that information?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. Now, in a practical sense, we do not have to worry about loss of life or immense costs of loss of property due to a failure of a car. It's more so, from my perspective, it was just if a car malfunctioned, then off to the rip track it went and got repaired and taken care of. But so it's a matter of what works for you or your group in terms of when to do it and how often to do it. I just want to see that it's done at all, and that, and even more importantly, that people understand what it is you need to do to have a piece of rolling stock that isn't going to be giving you grief. All right, so
Dave,
thank you.
One
Yes.
other thing. You might want to say, add another line, if required, does your rolling stock have a resistor wheel?
But number nine,
Because I mean, if you look at your, your own bottom of the box car, I can see that there's a resistor on there.
Right, that is correct. Let's see, does this?
Because I know at Golden State, we require that your equipment have resistors on there on at least one axle in the car.
Okay, thank you. I've just thrown that in there. All right, thank you there, Larry. And if that was Jonathan Quay, hello, Jonathan. I hope you're having a decent day out there. Now, if there is interchange, you're in a club setting or your equipment is going to go with you to other places, then is your name on there. And if you look at the car, let's see here if I can do this. Hello. You guys see my name sticker on the little car?
You can blow up that picture, but yeah.
Oh, I have to pull up the picture again. Okay, so I have to do this and here. You guys see my name?
Yeah.
Right. I just took my printer, said print, 6-point text, printed my name about 300 times on a piece of paper, cut it up with scissors, and have a little box full of my name. And so there you go, identified on the bottom of the piece of rolling stock. So that just handles, and again, if you're only running by yourself, this doesn't matter. Now, you can, of course, if Larry talked about having on the back of his car card service information, or you could put a sticker under the car saying if it's got a green sticker, it was done on this month or this year that it had been serviced. All right. Other comments before I move on to truck and wheel checks? All right. Now, you can see here in the form that you identify which axle is which one is being problematic. And this is because in a club setting, or even in a let's say a layout setting where a bunch of people are running on your layout and somebody says there's a problem, it is nice to know if which axle is in trouble. So you have up to, here you have up to 6 axles. You can identify which one had a problem. And this was being done in a group check-in session where somebody would then identify that, okay, the first 2 axles away from the brake wheel are good, but one axle is out of gauge, but the third axle is out of gauge. And so you could mark that which one it was, which one was dirty, which one isn't rolling freely, and also which truck is in trouble or passing. The idea here would be is while somebody's doing the checks, they would check off each axle, wheel set, and then which truck. And now I'm going to cover looking at the little, using the camera view of the car here. All right, I'm going to go off camera and be over here. The thing is, I think where's my target point? Right there. All right, so what we have is we of course have our NMRA wheel gauge to let us know whether this is correct. Now, the form does not say, are the wheels metal or plastic? That's up to you or the group that you're running with. Larry points out that if the group specifies that it needs to have a resistor, that's there. Now, Larry, does as a requirement that somebody puts an ohm meter across and sees that the wheel set is actually reading the specified amount of resistance?
Yeah, we're supposed to do that.
Okay. Now, the thing is it up to each individual, or is there a check-in process where somebody verifies it?
No, they're supposed to, I mean, we have a check-in process, but we really don't adhere to it very much, but so it's, on the honor system.
Yeah. Yes.
There's just way too many cars.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Now, I will remark on that topic that what helped for the groups I was with in the past is to make the car check-in sort of a group session, and not just in the sense of, okay, we're going to check it in and then spit upon the person whose car isn't up to snuff, but rather to have tools, materials, and helpers to work with the folks as check-in goes forward to get their cars to pass. Rather than just saying, you fail, get out of here with that piece of junk, but rather, hey, let's see what we can do here to fix the truck that cannot swivel freely, or what can we do to fix the wheel set that is not rolling freely. And I think that sort of teaching and helpful attitude can make a big bit of difference in terms of overall, especially for a group, of improving the quality of the fleet. Has anybody ever gotten into that sort of thing where there was a group activity to work on rolling stock? He says, I recommend it highly, because another part of it, for me at least, is that idea that we work together to improve our skills and learn techniques from other people. And that's what I'm about in doing this stuff. And I think that to the degree we can spread that idea around in the hobby, we all succeed. So we have the cleanliness of the wheels to look at. Now, this car recently got paint underneath and painted the side frame of the truck, painted the side of the wheels, painted the axles, but did I get all the paint off of the tread? And more importantly, getting the dirt that has built up on wheels off the tread of the wheels. Has everybody heard my story about what happened in Portola one year? The coastal valley lines had gone to the Portola Railroad Museum for railroad days. And we had a big yard, single-ended yard, which came out in a double Y arrangement where any track could hit both main lines. And one gentleman's train was set up. It wasn't a big train, I don't know, 10 cars or something. And he comes out of the yard, heads right down, and then goes, instead of following the curve of the Y, the cars basically went straight ahead and right onto the ground. And we all looked at it and went, what's going on here? And we looked at it, we looked at the track, said, we got a track problem. And then somebody turned over one of the cars, and he looked right here, and what was missing was there was no flange on the wheel. Can anybody guess why the wheels in that car didn't have a flange? Larry's shaking his head. How about there was so much black gunk built up on the tread of the wheels that it was as tall as the flange?
Gosh.
Yep.
Jeez.
We all looked at it in amazement. And somebody broke out a little, a couple of us broke out our little flat bladed screwdrivers and just sat there and put the screwdriver against here and just went like that, and big chunks of dirt came off the wheels. But that is why the checklist that we're talking about asks about making sure the wheels are clean. Of course, if you have a resistance wheel set, as is seen, come on, there, if you have a very filthy wheel set, then you're not going to be able to have that resistor do the job of providing detection of occupancy. All right, then the next point is the trucks rocking and pivoting freely. This one came into play very recently over in Pleasanton. In the lovely, cool weather we've been enjoying, the Pleasanton O-scalers and the HO people are running the trains in 100+ degrees, and we got persistent derailments in one area. And we looked at the track, and the track was good. There were no switches or turnouts in the area, just coming around a turn, and these cars were just going off the rail. And it wasn't dirty wheels, but when we took the car, picked up one of the cars, this is an O-scale car, and grabbed the truck and tried to do this, it was like, it was frozen. I mean, it would move, but it took a large amount of force. Now, in this case, notice the screw head in here. On these particular O-scale cars, the particular truck was plastic, and the particular screw that somebody drove into there to hold the truck on was just a little too big. But when it was normal temperatures, the plastic, there was enough freedom of movement, but it was 100+ degrees. The plastic expanded a bit and froze the trucks. And we couldn't do anything at that point except take the car out of service because the truck could not pivot freely and follow the track. So this is something that you want to check. Now, let's see. We got notes from Ken here in the comments. Thank you, Ken. AAR rules on bad order cars. And that would be interesting to see what the AAR considers to be bad orders and what to do about it. Replacing wheels, worn wheels, is something Ken lists. Wheels may be returned to owning railroad or turned on lathes and held for reuse. Huh. Yes, those are now, fortunately for us, the closest we come to worn wheels needed turning is just getting gunk cleaning them. I generally, even on the heavily run O-scale stuff at Pleasanton, you can see sometimes the finish on the wheel is a bit worn. Sometimes there's like chrome plating or nickel plating over brass, and you see the brass showing up, but thank goodness they don't wear out in that sense on the treads of the wheels. Worn out bearings, needle points or bearings on the trucks may be a separate issue. For us though, of course, just does it still rotate freely tells us whether or not I think we have that as something to address. So thank you, Ken, for throwing those comments in there. All right, back to here. So the pivot and rock the rocking of trucks is important also because although we try mightily to have our track work be very consistent, even, not tilted, no bad sections, you still need to have some ability for a truck to, in this case, I have a slight rock, and the rock is left to right and front to back to help it follow the rail if there are slight irregularities. Now, how much to have? It's been my experience in HO that it doesn't need to be much, but there needs to be some. There is a school of thought. Has anybody, let's see, what's the term I've used? 3-point, anybody here heard the idea of a 3-point support for a car?
I'm not sure, but I remember reading for a while that the front trucks, whatever that is, swivel, but the back truck swivels and pivots. And I
Right.
don't know if that's what you're talking about.
Well, the way I have seen it expressed is you take one of the trucks and you tighten the screw down to the point where there is hardly any rocking at all. And then the other truck, you do adjust it so that there's more rocking. The apparent goal for this is that if you have both trucks allowing rock, the car can go down the line rocking back and forth. I consider this to be a craftsman level tinker or adjustment, because when you are tightening this one up, for example, to suppress the rocking of the car, if you go a little too far, you now have tightened the truck and the truck no longer pivots freely, and that causes problems. Yes, it can be done. I don't recommend it simply because in a group setting, some people might be able to do it and some people might not. And as somebody else pointed out to me, watch the prototype. Sometimes the cars are going, rocking a little bit left to right. So I just want to see, in this form, it just says, do they pivot and rock? And that's front, back, left to right, and pivot freely. That you never, if you grab the truck, I think I still have the image up of no, I've got the form up, don't I? There. Okay, so now we have, so it should be.
Make a comment.
Yes, Bob, that's what I'm here for, is to hear your comments.
So I'm sort of concerned. I think that this is great, but when you're doing go, no go things that don't have a gauge.
Yes.
And for rock and pivot, there's no real. So for wheel gauge, there's a separation. There's a gauge.
Yes.
But for rock and pivot, there's really no concept to how much you need, and so I think that there needs to be some thought about what to do about that, because otherwise it's very subjective, and you may need, if you're on a modular layout, you may actually need a little more rock and pivot as you traverse the modular interfaces compared to a club layout.
Agreed.
So while I'm talking, the one other spec that I think that you would need to check, that you have a gauge for already, is width, to make sure you clear platforms, because you want to make sure you have platform clearance. You want to make sure everything you build. So if it's a purchased car, it's likely to, I don't know, actually, who knows? So a good thing to measure, because and then actually to say how wide it is, because maybe there are places where there's reduced clearances, and it's like traveling under a highway overpass where you say, hey, I got reduced clearance here on my layout. Don't put the K28 through, or whatever, K20. So that was what I wanted to contribute.
Thank you. Yeah, now the NMRA gauges have a certain plate. That's the word. There's plate A, plate B, plate C for how wide, how tall something is to get through a certain area. And yes, that is another thing to be checked. That may be peculiar, of course, to a certain layout where clearances are tight or clearances are wide as to how much is tolerable. But point taken. So you could consider whether stuff stays within the plate so that it doesn't snag on platforms. On the rock and pivot, point taken, we don't have a gauge, but I'm mostly concerned, Bob, is there any rock and pivot? If there is no rock and no pivot, then we have a problem. And then,
well, I just wanted to suggest that perceptible rock and pivot might not be good enough to help it actually traverse rough track.
True.
And so if the point is to try to help it traverse track properly, there's going to be an optimal amount of slop.
Right. And so for an individual or club or group, you know your track, how bad it can be, and so then you go from there.
I don't think anybody knows how to quantify this. I don't think anybody has a spec and it's just different in the club. I just think that
Right.
this is something
Right.
that we're talking about and there's no
Yes.
spec for it.
Yeah. Well, for me, I just would like to see there's some, but this comes down to when this is being done, whoever's doing it is thinking about a particular railroad, whether it's their own or a club or a modular display. All right. So
Dave,
yes.
one other thing on rocking and all that.
Yes.
I think double stack cars are probably something even more special in that the truck is actually coupled to one platform, and then
Yep.
the other platform is either screwed or just sitting on it. And that other platform really has much more freedom of movement because it's not associated with the truck itself.
Right. Yes. There's several things having to do with shared trucks, and that is one of them, is that you're losing more control of. In fact, I just got a old early Southern Pacific stack set of wells where it had the big bulkheads on either end, because back in the early days they were afraid that the stacked container should be retained not just by the interbox connectors. And indeed, they just have a pin sticking up and the next well just slips down and sits on there. I actually haven't run it on a real railroad yet, just a straight piece of track in my home layout. And so I don't know how well they're going to do. But yes, that is another, how shall I put it? Another wrinkle in checking in rolling stock is unusual rolling stock, such as those well cars sharing trucks in between units. This, in a sense, gentlemen, to some degree, some of this works best after feedback of you've run the piece of equipment and it gets in trouble, and then you can say, all right, what was causing the trouble? Play detective, and then figure out for that particular piece of equipment some accommodation or work needs to be done to bring it up to an acceptable level of operational reliability. And so that is that's in the mix also when you're checking in equipment. And oh, of course, now Larry, the other thing is there, when that piece of equipment shows up coming into this rip track process, does it come with a tag that says what was wrong? Right?
Yeah.
And having feedback. Ken Adams wrote, there were AAR rules on bad order cars, their contents and ownership. And I'll bet the AAR also says that you say something about what the flippin' problem was that prompted the car. I mean, yeah, you sit there in virtual railfan and you're watching them take a single car somewhere, and the virtual railfan camera zooms over to the back end of the car. There's no coupler at all. It got bodily came out of the mechanism that retained the coupler. That doesn't need much of a bad order tag, but derails constantly on the yard lead turnout, something to help the people working on the car to figure out what to do. And that's sort of another side of this, and I'm not going to say any more about that other than documenting problems is a great help to the RIP track personnel. All right, back to...
Well, Dave, along that line, you know, when we work on Ted Stevens' layout and have op sessions, we have a little bad order slip that goes in. So when it's pulled off the layout, the guy knows, you know, just kind of roughly where to look. And
Yep.
Those should be understandable, but not overly specific, so that people just don't go to one little spot and look. If they pull the car off, it should be checked for pretty much everything along with the specific problem.
Yes.
And one add-on to that is after the car is fixed, the bad order slip stays in the car card packet and it's put on the layout, and that way, if it fails again, you know, you got some history and you can go give a bunch of grief to the guy that said he fixed it and find out he didn't. But you got to know the problem is really fixed, and if you discard the slip with the problem, you don't know that the car, has had problems before.
So providing some way of getting a history.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is where you have the car card with the pocket, and you would slip in the bad order tag in there.
Yes.
Got it. Nice.
I have a lovely little pink piece of paper, pink bad order card and it's bright pink kind of thing, and it does exactly what Earl said. You jot down the name of the car and what happened, and there's a couple of check boxes.
Right. Excellent. So there's some food for thought in terms of trying to get some way to know that it was bad ordered. Somebody, did it, and then be able to go back and go, wait a minute, this thing is just derailed, and wait a minute, it derailed again. What was done, and so on. But this is now, some of you, I will remark, some of you think, man, this is sure really picky or fussy or everything else, but it is simply one way to, if you want, to try to improve operational reliability. That's all. And the thing is, if it's not needed on your railroad and it doesn't float your boat, don't worry about it. I'm just offering these ideas, particularly if you're struggling with reliability of rolling stock. And these are some things to try and a tool I'm offering for your consideration. All right, couplers. Now, the couplers give a lot of us trouble. I would say, to be fair, I would say that a lot of us at one time or another have struggled with a particular car, or couplers in general. And the thing is, there's a lot there's a lot going on, and a lot we expect of couplers. The one function that most of us depend on is simply that when you put the car on the track behind a bunch of locomotives with a bunch of cars behind it, and you start to put some power on it, that the coupler doesn't bodily come off the car, whether the coupler itself or the entire coupler pocket. Ken smiles. The thing is, we also expect a few other things from couplers. We expect that, yes, sir? I think that was Larry?
No.
No? Okay. We expect, or we hope, that when the couplers come together, let me switch to there. When the couplers come together, we kind of hope, oh, this lighting's not the best for this. Let's try this. You guys see the couplers? No?
Well, we can't see the couplers.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the angle right here.
There you go.
There. Right. We expect when the couplers tend together that they come together and they couple. Now, if one of the couplers is way off at an angle, we have a fail. Either way, if the couplers, so that's one thing we expect. We expect that when we put a pull on them, that they don't bodily pull off, but we also expect that if we put a pull on them, that they don't simply uncouple. And that is of course, uncoupling is a mix of two things. Who was mentioning the sometimes imperfect track work on modular layouts? I think it was Bob. I was mentioning it. And the only thing, you can try to fix, especially once you're set up at a show, you can sit there and try to fix track work problems, shimming and cursing and bending metal and whatever to try to get it so that the track isn't, like this, but hopefully it's close to level as you come to joints and everything else. But what we also have to worry about is if the couplers, again, I'm back here, trying to show you if the couplers are vertically misaligned, that is, the one is much higher than the other, and trying to get the camera angle.
Good.
There we go. You know, if it starts off like this, any slight track work problems are going to get you uncoupled. And so then, of course, we have our dear and beloved friends, the coupler height gauge, right? In this case, this is a plastic one from, I think this is a KD coupler height gauge. And bear with me, there. Right, I think you guys are familiar with these. Something that's more dependable is this, which is a machined metal block centered on the NMRA specified height for the center line of the coupler, and with a width that gives a little bit of up and down slop, but is very, it's not going to go anywhere or get knocked out of alignment for checking the height of the couplers. But that is only part of it, because you have the coupler height right when the car is just sitting there. But let's get the coupler. Does the coupler have a lot of vertical play? That is, if you push it up and down, back and forth like that, does the coupler have a lot of vertical play? This is a concern, because if you have a coupler that is drooping, hanging very low, when you put a pull on that coupler may lift up under tension. And when it was hanging low under no tension, it went into and matched the coupler height gauge. But when you put a pull on it, the thing lifts up, straight up, and then perhaps uncouples from the other car. So you've got the vertical play to consider. And this gets more complicated because KD, and I tip my hat to them, KD developed their remote magnetic uncoupling system years ago. I don't know how long. Does anybody know when the KD coupler with the trip pin, 1950s, 60s?
1960s, yeah.
1960s. And I think it was an amazing achievement to develop that system, which met the needs of model railroaders at the time, because we would sit there at our throttles and our Atlas switches, right, the little slide switches and stuff to throw turnouts. And Katie said, well, now you can have, 8 feet away, you can have a switch, and there's a little industry, and you put down a Katie magnet, and lo and behold, you can shove a car back there and then stop over the magnet and pull away, and voila, you've uncoupled, just like magic. But in developing that system, which met that need, you ended up with a coupler pocket that actually lets the coupler sag a little bit. And so you had to be careful about the lifting issue. The other thing about the Katie system as developed back then is I'm sure most of you have dealt with the lovely little, I think they're phosphor bronze springs that you put in the pocket with the coupler. That is, Jesse, you have that smile of complete satisfaction, that required some real care to have it work reliably. And real care, the trip pin had to be the right height above the magnet. The magnet had to be at the right height. And there was a fair amount of fussy work you had to do. We have our KD, and here we have, look at that. There's a KD magnet. And if we look, come on. Here's the KD gauge with the little tab at the bottom that says the trip pin has to clear that flat little platform, not too, and it can't be too high because the magnet can't grab it, and it can't be too low because then it grabs everything along the line and causes trouble. How many of you have, in working in HO, are now using KD whisker couplers?
I'm using the whiskers. As a matter of fact, I standardized on the 158 for HO standard gauge.
Right.
A big package of them, and with
Yep.
any old KDs as they come along for maintenance.
Yes, I have a ridiculously large and expensive box full of couplers, old style, new style, different styles. Although Ken says, I think, an important word here, standardized. Because I think another thing that affects reliability is standardization. Within a fleet, if you have a standard coupler, a standard way of mounting couplers, those things can help you get more reliable results rather than doing crazy one-off mountings for everything you have. KD has
I just want to add that I cut off the trip pins these days because I've decided that the magnetic uncoupling features really did belong in the 20th century rather than the 21st. And most of us are much more tuned, particularly in operations, to having the brakeman get out there and pull the pin with a little whatever we use to do it.
Exactly. And thank you, Ken, for bringing that up, because I mentioned that back in the day, you sat at your little control station and you had your throttles and you had your remote controls to control the turnouts and so on and so forth, and the blocks, blah, blah, blah. Walk around DCC means you are, and modern layout designs means you're usually right there with your train, which means you can, let's see here, you can take your uncoupling tool of whatever flavor you like and take that uncoupling tool and, like the prototype, pull the pin on the cars you want to uncouple by hand, which is the way the real railroad does it. So in a sense, we have actually gotten closer to the prototype by walking away from the KD system. I merely cut the trip pins off of all my stuff also because it's just another point of unreliability when they snag on things or just trying to pick up a car and it then seems to want to permanently marry itself to the next car because their two trip pins are having an inappropriate relationship. So that is the change that moved us away from the older KDs. But I think in terms of reliability, a KD coupler, whisker coupler in the KD, modern KD boxes, both handles, there's less problem with drooping, less issue with drooping, and they center better. And that's another thing here on the checklist. Come on. Oh, click this button, right? So
Up the fives eventually.
okay, we've got knuckle height. Knuckle operates correctly. And the rip track obviously has to have a stock of knuckle springs for whatever sort of couplers you're working on that need knuckle springs.
David,
Yes, sir.
might it not just be worthwhile to have a line that says that the knuckle spring is installed properly, because that is such a frequent cause of malfunction that instead of just saying it operates well, I think the two things that I would have is that the coupler spring is installed and that at rest it centers properly. And then the other one about whether you already have about whether it moves freely and springs back is fine. But the two things I would inspect statically is the spring in place and does it center properly?
Yeah. Well, there's another, here I'm editing as we go. I'm getting Bob's comment here. This is great. This is great.
The current
So
45, 50 at 48 and 158, you just I have yet to have one of them lose a spring.
right?
Spring come out.
It's not often, but I run into it occasionally, Ken. But it's still that you just that the spring is there, it's right, working right, the knuckle is operating correctly. Yes. Now,
Manufacturer is much better.
okay. Now, coupler moves freely from side to side, back to center. Does anybody remember? Well, first of all, does anybody remember the plastic couplers that came out there that would have plastic centering whiskers and a plastic knuckle spring? Yes, no? I ran into them. And it was a shame because in the modular thing, people's cars are sitting in boxes before they come to the show. And a car with the plastic coupler would be pressing against the side of the box with the knuckle held open. And you take the car out of the box, put in the layout, and the little plastic whisker that's supposed to keep the knuckle closed has taken a set and doesn't close the knuckle. So that was one of the reasons I abandoned plastic knuckle or plastic couplers, because of that problem of the plastic taking a set. But coupler moves freely from side to side and back to center. This is another trade-off with the old KD system, which is you had a very sensitive, that little copper-colored spring, centering spring, wasn't very strong because it had to accept the force from the KD magnet to throw the coupler over. So the centering wasn't very strong. The new KD whisker couplers center very strongly because they no longer have that bias built into them in the older system with the little spring. It's one of the things that, but the thing is, we still, by whatever you have, I'm going back to the car here. If you're checking in, we just have, it is, to me, it's just simply a requirement that the coupler, either way, that it strongly returns to center. I know that I got to the point where I was sometimes polishing the shank, burnishing the shank of the coupler to reduce drag, and putting the KD Greasem finely powdered graphite in the pocket to help that not very strong centering spring, to make sure that it brought the coupler back to center. So that is the next thing that, to me, is a necessary thing to check. But there's the other element to this, which is, let me get one here. Here we go. This car, what are you doing? Oh, dummy. You will note that this car, the stock coupler box is gone. There were a couple of reasons for this. The primary reason is the stock coupler box wouldn't really close very well. It was a thin tongue on the top, and then the rest of the box in the bottom, and there was no way to hold them together. And it just sort of gaped open, which meant the coupler had a lot of vertical play possible. So I just simply went after it, cut the whole thing away, and put my KD number 5 on here. And I'd like to make a confession to you all. I buy junk cars. I go to the auction. I go to, like, the Stan Landro Club will have their open houses, and they'll have a bunch of $3 and $5 junk cars. And the junk cars sometimes will have who knows what for holding the coupler on. And so I sometimes will have to put a new pocket on wholesale. Can anybody tell me what the problem is, or what the potential problem is with this coupler, this new coupler I've put on here? There's two things I'm aware of. Maybe you think of more.
It'll swivel.
Bingo, there's one.
Mhm.
Once
Number-
it starts swiveling, it'll work loose.
Yep.
Um,
Yes, Ken.
buying new Rapido cars, you have to be very careful. The couplers are a pseudo KD, and they may need replacement, which is not easy.
Yep. Yep. Replacing couplers can be a pain in the keister. But the thing that Bob points out, which is however you get them on there, you have to keep them from swiveling around a center screw. KD does provide screws on the side. That takes care of the problem. You put in 2 screws, one on either side, and that coupler is no longer going to swivel. This coupler, so happens is I did use the center hole there, but what I did do is I used a liquid melting type cement, and the coupler is glued to the styrene floor of the car, which is brave because if I now have to replace that thing, I would have to carve it off the bottom of the floor of the car. So yeah, Jesse nods his head.
Yeah, I know. And I have a silly question. Let me.
First, before I assemble.
Hold on, Ken. Say again, Jesse.
No, it's just a silly question, and that is, what kind of screws are you using? Because I noticed, you know, I'm tearing off the coupler pockets. I'm either doing this, and I am gluing them down sometimes, and then I'm trying to punch this thumping great hole through everything to thread a new screw. And I'm just curious, what's the screw size and thread?
I'm using 256. I standardized on that
Okay.
some years ago.
Yeah,
Now there's
a,
double aught 80 and there's aught 80 and double aught 90s.
yeah, Aiken has a drill and tap set for 256.
Yeah, that's what I've got.
Yep.
Okay, so
now, mind you, that Bullseye product is particularly aimed at Athearn cars with the snap-on metal cover, bottom cover that you snap up on there, and the Bullseye is intended to let you run a screw right through the pivot, the stud that the coupler goes on. Although I found sometimes the stud is too tall, you tighten the screw down, it hits the stud before it actually holds the metal box down firmly. But it's there. I'm going to mention though, Bob mentioned the problem of swiveling. The other problem is you have to make flipping sure that the coupler is centered left to right when you do it. You know, if you're sort of tearing everything off and starting from scratch, taking pains to make sure that it's centered is important. Don't ask me why I know that, but yeah, couplers. There's even more going on with couplers, but the main point here, the purpose for the check sheet here, is that at least you've got people thinking and looking at the couplers. I'm going to digress here for a moment since I see something. Okay, that screw head. It is neither too big nor too small, especially when you're replacing trucks or replacing stuff. Again, I standardized a long time ago in 256 for this, but you can get 256 screws with all sizes and types of heads. And it's finding a coupler with a head that is neither too small or too big. Too small because some trucks, the opening at the bottom is huge, and you can actually have it where the truck will just about fall off or jam because the screw head is very close to the size of the opening. The other thing about small is that if the screw head is too small, even if you can have a situation where there's a lot of play, side-to-side play of the whole, the bolster here and the screw head, which will let the truck slop back and forth. I actually have a range of 256 screws with different size heads, so I can find the right size screw where the head does a good job of occupying that space. This helps limit rock and side-to-side motion. It's another fussy thing, but it's something that I try to have a little bit of attention on. It isn't necessary, and I wouldn't condemn a car. Yes, Mr. Gardine. Oh, I think Bob is saying he had to go. All right. Let me go back to the form. So couplers, again, knuckle height, knuckle spring installed and knuckle operates correctly. Coupler moves freely from each side back to center. Trip pin height, and I need to myself buy a trip pin tool because on the O-scale layout that we have problems with trip pin height. So I need to get that nice trip pin pliers so I can adjust them more easily. And works over a magnet. And you'll notice again that on the test track, which we will talk about more another time, I do have the KD magnets on there's the KD magnet, and I have one on each end of the test track, so you can get the car, roll it over each one, and see that the trip pin does what it's supposed to do, opens the knuckle and moves the coupler off to the side the appropriate amount. So those are the things we are checking in the area of the coupler checks. Anybody else have any more comments on coupler checks?
You can do a whole clinic on just couplers.
I intend to. Today is sort of an overview. I'm going to be doing this stuff based on articles I'll be submitting to Bob Cardine. But yeah, to have this live discussion, I think is really important. Okay, now the next thing on the list here is roll down check. And each individual can have their ideas about whether a car that you literally have to drag by hand along the track to a car that if you sit there, it's on level track and you just go and puff at it and it merrily rolls away. Those are, you make this is another judgment thing. And an individual, a group can decide to say how much of a grade a car should be able to roll down without assistance. I'm running at 3%. The thing is, a really good car with a good truck and wheel set can roll down amazingly small grades. I've seen less than 0.5%, and cars are rolling away. The O-scale, one of the O-scale guys has a passenger train with ball bearings in the car axles, and you just look at the cars and they roll away. It's just amazing. And I've seen some HO equipment, again, with good metal wheel sets that is very free, but it's just deciding what percentage you consider to be acceptable. And this, of course, has to do with how long of a train do you want to run with a certain amount of motive power? 2 cars or 20 cars or 50 cars? Ken?
Yeah, just interject. One of the things that is most common for making that car not roll is to see if there's something in the axle boxes.
The area of the bearing journals?
Yeah, the journal box.
Ken is absolutely right. One of the best tools I ever bought was something from Micromark or something, and it's this pointy little drill, and I have to go through my plastic trucks and just get the little burr off and polish them up.
Right. Let me bring something up here. Going back to the camera view, here's the Micromark number 82838. Is this right side up? Is the text
No,
right
it's
side
not.
up or
It's
upside down? Hey, my odds were 50-50, okay? Okay.
That's the tool.
That's the tool. And it makes a huge difference. The thing is, if you have a stock wheel set and wheel, then, and it's not rolling well, then this tool is good. If you have you're retrofitting whoa, rolled away. If you're retrofitting a different wheel set into an existing truck or swapping trucks or whatever, then it may require more work with this tool, but it does make can make a huge amount of difference. The other thing, of course, is sometimes badly made trucks will have molding flash that is fouling the wheel set and causing it to not roll freely. But the main thing is when you're checking in the car, I mean, just even if you didn't have a roll down gauge, if I got there, if I sit here, I'll use the one with the resistor since you can see it. It's likely this car is going to pass my 3% roll down without any trouble because you can see how freely it is moving. Now, it doesn't have the full weight of the car on it, but it seems to be a fairly good way to estimate whether you've got something that rolls freely. Of course, if you have to sit there and put on the flat table and sit there and go, okay, it rolls, you know, in the sense that the wheels aren't dragging, that they're actually rolling as you move it by hand. That's, to me, that's not really a valid check. Flipping it over. Yes, go.
One of the other things, just to mention, is crap that ends up in the journal box over time.
Yep.
You know, you'd be surprised if you've ever run a vacuum car over your layout at home, and then the next thing you look at is where'd all this fine dirt come from? And that gets in there. It's not flash or anything like that. It's just built up crap, the same stuff that's going on the wheels.
Belly button lint.
Belly button lint.
And of course, what I have run into is paint. Somebody is weathering the truck and putting weathering on the wheels, and the paint gets up into the journal box area and freezes or impedes the free motion of the wheels. That same tool that we just showed addresses that. Now, to me, that tool would be one of the ones that if I was running a rip track operation at a rolling stock check-in session, I would have that tool to hand and either do it or hand it to the individual and say, here, run that through your journals and clean them up and see if we can get your car to roll to whatever standard is being used. So that is now again, the point of the roll down check is simply that you can be able to pull that in a train and not just sit there and have, I can only pull 10 cars up the grade.
I gotta get going to work right now pretty soon. I'm taking a train right now. I'm gonna commute to
all right, Jonathan.
Convention. Hello.
All right. Have a safe day at work, Jonathan.
Because I am working on my bot train layout and bot model vehicle, the old train car. It takes time, David, in the group. It sure does take patience and time to do that bot train model.
Yes.
And I got Long Beach Convention on my mind too, because I want to go to that Metro Shop tour. Interesting for Jonathan. That'd be interesting. Like recognizing another friend of mine from the South Bay from BTF. That'd be interesting for Jonathan to go. I think I'll be good. It will be at the convention at Long Beach. I'm going to fly down there and take a hotel show at the airport. I'm going to work it out, right?
All right. Well, again,
Long Beach is going to be an expensive trip. Very expensive. It will be, right?
Oh, yes.
I might have to just go one day and then commute back and forth back from LAX to SFO. Just stay there for 1 day or 2 days enough to get out of here. Good idea, right?
Yes, indeed. All right, Jonathan. We're going to return to our session here, okay?
It's going to be expensive, that convention at Long Beach. It will be. It's outrageous price, right?
Yes, it is.
So just go 1 day or 2 days. Maybe 1 day is enough to get out of here. Hurry up. I'm going to have to do that, right?
Right. All right, Jonathan. We're going to return to the clinic, okay?
Excuse me. Go what I'm seriously interested in, right? Correct, right?
Yes.
My interest. I got to get going. I signed up already. I did, right?
All right.
I did sign up for Long Beach.
Good. Hey, well,
good job.
Have a great trip there. All right, we're going to return to any questions or comments on roll down and what sort of what percentage grade is appropriate for you or your club for roll down. Any comments?
I'm going to say 2%.
All right. 3% is pretty forgiving. My stuff, you know, if it's hesitant at 3%, I work it over anyway, but it's to have something. as a go, no go. And then it's picking out a number that works for you. Most modern, now, mind you, if you have brass equipment and such, you may have more of a challenge than modern stuff with the modern slippery plastics and everything that are often found in trucks. Okay,
If you
weight.
are operating a brass car
Yep.
and you want it to be really good in operations, you're going to have to replace the trucks with modern trucks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you got to face the fact that what was on that car, particularly if it was before 2010,
Mm-hmm.
this is crap.
Speaking technically, huh? Yeah, it's a challenge, and that sort of leads into the next topic, because whether it's you or the group you're working with, whether NMRA recommended practice RP2 for weight is acceptable and appropriate. Now, wait a minute. So I have RP 20.1. I'm sorry, RP 20.1. The club I worked with, we decided that we would adhere to that recommended practice, plus or minus a half an ounce, which was a pretty good amount of slop. Some people don't care about weight at all. Some people weight far more heavily than the recommended practice.
I'm a heavier waiter, because I find that now maybe it's whatever, but I find that if I'm slightly heavier or somewhat a little heavier, I get better tracking.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's bad track work on my part, but I'm a firm I believe that this is it's a good number, but I use a little heavier number.
And if it works for you and the length of trains that you haul, you're golden. Yeah. This, I think, Jesse, is more useful in an interchange or large club situation where there's rolling stock from everybody and anybody. Larry, do you guys do anything on weight for your club? Unmute, please, Larry.
Yeah, we're supposed to. We have, the weight standards the same as you have here, and we're supposed to do it. But again, it's the honor system.
Right. Of course, what ends up happening, of course, is you end up with cars stringlining and derailing in places they shouldn't, because there's nothing holding the wheels down to the rail. This is a contentious subject, and I think in some areas, but I find it just as a basic default that in the years that we ran this standard up in Santa Rosa on the club there, running 50, 60 car trains and stuff stayed on the rail using this range of weights. Now, there is another factor here, which is the loading per axle, but there's also the difference in spacing between the trucks. So you'll notice that a 85-foot car is 6.8 ounces and a 20-foot car is 2.4 ounces. Does anybody know why that's important? Anybody want to guess?
It has to do with vector forces, but that's not what you're asking.
No, I believe you're right. That is.
No, it does, because of anyway.
Well, the long cars, it's easier. The sideways forces on the trucks are less easy for the car to resist compared to when the trucks are nice and close together. If you have a 20-foot car, the sideways forces as they come around a turn or go through a turnout or stuff, the forces are quite a bit different. And so you have to increase the weight per axle. But there's another element to this. Where's that car? Come here. Here, boy. I have to find a certain piece of rolling stock. And it's here in the box. I've got a fleet of equipment that I've been working on getting up to my local standards. And I can't find it. Okay, I took an old heavy-duty flat car that has 8 axles under it instead of 4. It's got bogies with 2 trucks on each end, and I increased the weight on that car so that the loading per axle would be closer to if it had just 2 regular trucks on it to help it stay on the rails. So that's one case where I run heavier than that. But the main thing is Jesse has got a situation where heavier works for him. But whenever you have derailments and you pick up a car and it weighs nothing, I think that is an issue you have to watch for. Now, I'm going to show you something having to do with this that is particularly challenging. Let me get the car in question up here on the camera. All right, this car is going to be run empty. Everybody probably recognizes a center beam lumber car. In this case, it's period correct for me. I'm modeling 1987. This is another junk car that has had terrible things done to it, and I'm still working on rebuilding it from the ground up. But can you see what where's the underframe, guys? Can you see what's there in place of the underframe?
Weights.
A whole bunch of sheet lead. And with the metal wheel sets replacing the plastic wheel sets, and with basically filling up pretty much, you can see there's still a little bit of the side sill visible, but there's 3 layers of lead sheet in here to bring this car up to the NMRA recommended practice, because this car is going to be run empty. And the thing is, that sacrifice of underbody detail is a choice I made, because everything we've been working on here in this discussion is the devil is in the details. And we're talking about many of the details aimed at reliable operation, as opposed to details having to do with, oh man, that thing looks very prototypical. I will be painting this sort of the color of this axle here, right, which is some craft paint called dark taupe, and I mix some black in to cover that sort of grimy color that the whole underneath of the cars take. And I'll tack an air tank, just glue an air tank on there, and a few pieces of that. When you're looking sideways at the car, you can see there's something under there. I don't care about having beautiful underbody detail in this car if I can't get it up to weight. And so I sacrificed some.
It's your choice.
Prototypical detail.
If you're like me, sort of an RPM guy, I want to do that detail.
Yep.
But I'm not an operator. I mean,
right.
If the car runs back and forth on my layout, that's fine.
Yeah, there you go. This is a choice. Now, in doing this rip track stuff, though, the rip track perspective is reliability, 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 and to sacrifice some prototypical detail. The comical thing about some of these cars, though, is that I have one more sample to show on this question of prototype versus. Okay, these are both scrounge cars. Okay.
Yeah.
What's different? What's different between these 2 cars?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have it
put the
pocket.
You put the weight on and covered the floorboards.
Ah, interestingly, the car on the left, again, it was a $3 wonder. When you pick the car up, a massive weight was slamming around inside the car. I mean, wham, bang, just gigantic thing. Now, after a lot of cursing, I took what remained of the floor. The right-hand car here, you can see the molded plastic floor. The molded plastic floor on the car in the left had the general surface shape of a potato chip. The whole thing was curled up like this, the entire length. And inside, once I got it cut free, it took me about 20 minutes to get what remained of that floor out of away from the body of the car. And what I found inside was the steel plate that was the nominal weight of the car and a huge slug of stick-on tire weights. The car was about 3 ounces over the recommended practice. Somebody had put what looked to be about a gallon of super glue on the floor to, quote, hold the metal weight to the floor. The floor just died. It just and warped. I couldn't save it. It wasn't even considered, worth it. It was hopeless. And so on the left hand, you see what happened is I cut away the remnants of the floor from the underframe. You'll notice the underframe looks pretty much the same. We're going to leave aside the coupler pocket for the moment. And I put a 1/10 inch thick styrene deck in place of what was left of the floor. Then I cleaned up and re-glued the metal weight, cutting away a lot of the stick-on tire weights to bring the car back down to the NMRA standard. The other things, and we'll get into this another time, is this car, you'll see a Katie red washer underneath the truck. There's the red color. You can just see the red color here of the washer to bring this coupler in the stock box up to the standard correct height. But I didn't really, in the wrecked car, the one on the other side, again, terrible things have been done to the frame. I gave up on the pocket that came there and cut it all away and mounted a Katie pocket, a modern Katie pocket with a whisker coupler, being careful about centering the mounting for that. And then the pin, some people, I still haven't learned the proper term. It's not kingpin, but it's the pin upon which the truck pivots. Does anybody know what that is called? Anyway, I think you know what I'm talking about. It sticks up and then the pin sticks up and then the bolster slides over it and then you run the screw in, right?
That's
Often
the modeling thing only. It's not on the prototype.
agreed. I'm not exactly sure what I know the trucks come off of cars when they derail, so there's something that keeps that the truck pivots upon. But whatever it is, on the model, the pin had been mangled. Somebody took a screw and tightened it down to the point where they mashed that pin. So it's a hollow tube, really, because the screw has to go through it, right? It was hopeless, and so I cut it away. And what you see here, if you look, can you see the little ears? That is a part of an older style Katie coupler pocket that has a pin. Can you see it, Jesse?
Yeah.
Right. If I pulled the screw out, I could lift it away. Now it turns out I've got a Katie red and gray on here because the coupler mounting, when I changed it, changed the height. But the point is I did all this work to get the car stable because of the wrecked floor, to get a weight that was staying put. Then continuing to do work to get the car so it could pass the check-in. But this is an example of my sacrificing some elements of appearance of a car to achieve my goals of a reliable car that would be reliable long term.
In the past, I have been known to cut what I want to call the boss for
Yep.
for what the screw goes through.
Hmm.
Cut it off completely.
Yep.
And replace it, interesting enough, with the centering part of a coupler. The little round piece that Katie uses on the top of the coupler box.
Hmm.
Cut
I
that.
think that's what you see. That is exactly what you see here in the, okay, let me get the KD red and gray washers off.
Yeah, you can actually use the whole KD.
Right here, right, Ken? Is that what I'm showing you?
Yeah, there's the coupler box as a replacement. It works.
Yep. Has anybody else done this? Ken and I do it. Anybody,
Oh.
the rest of you? Now, the thing is here, the height of this projection that I'm pointing at, ideally, the height of this projection is less than the height of the step. It's actually recessed a little bit so that when you bring the screw down, the screw engages, it comes close to the truck bolster here so that you can better control the rock of the truck. If it hits the pin well before it touches the truck, then it may be like this. The problem is people then keep tightening the screw to try to stop the rock, and they crush that little round post. It squashes out and binds up the truck. So this is one of those little devil in the detail things again that.
And a prototype, the screw essentially replaces the kingpin.
Got it.
The wrong side.
A rather large screw in the prototype, I would guess, not a 256.
Did you thread the 256 coupler box?
Kingpin is smooth.
Sometimes I will thread it, Jesse, but sometimes only partially thread it, because I have, over the years with magnet cars that are in the train, picked up those screws because they work their way out. And so I will sometimes only partially thread it, or if the hole is there and I run the screw in and it's got enough friction that it won't back out by itself. I also even have a little in my one of my rip track boxes here. I have some removable thread lock, the thread locking compound, but indeed you don't want that screw so loose that it will back out over time. So yeah, it depends on it, but it's more, I'll run the screw in. If I can't get it in because it's so hard to drive, because sometimes the plastic is really stiff, I'll thread it a bit and just do what I can. But the goal is to have a screw that when you run it in, it's not going to come out by itself over time. So I do have the taps, my 256 taps, and will do that if I deem it appropriate. And that's also true if I do run a screw in to hold a coupler box, is I'll thread it, or sometimes with coupler boxes, it's while the floor is off, mount the thing and then put a nut on the back side, if you have the room to do it. But again, it's that getting to reliability is, again, the touchstone here. All right, so we've talked about the weight. Now, the weight is firmly secured. This one car here, the basket case, the weight was completely, for all that it, had a ton of glue in there. The failure with the glue eating the deck, the floor deck of the car, spoiled that, and it just slammed around. But you definitely want them to stay put. The center beam car, it's your friend and mine, Walther's glue, used to secure the sheet lead, and the usual routine of letting it air dry enough so it turns more into contact cement, so you don't have a bunch of solvent trapped between plastic parts of the car and the metal that won't let the solvent escape. So, and then now the resistance wheel set check, I guess, would just be an ohm meter and knowing what the standard is. Larry, what resistance is the target for you guys for your wheel sets?
I honestly don't know, per se. I mean, it always seems to change depending on what resource I'm looking at. So I just picked one and just pulled it off of Amazon.
There you go. I'm running 10K. It partly depends on the sensitivity of your detection system.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be using the Chubb DCCODs, and you can adjust them, but I'm shooting for 10K. It also has to do with how conductive is your roadbed and your ballast and your glue and your paint. So it's all in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Just for fun, on my cabooses, I put 2 wheel sets to try to increase the reliability of detection on that end of train. And on big cars, like big passenger cars and long freight cars, I'll put 1 on each end of those too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an 85-foot car. But that's kind of again, what works for you and your railroad.
Yeah, but I mean, you always need to check. I mean, if you'd like to put it out earlier, if your wheels get too dirty,
Yep.
and defeat the purpose. And sometimes your resistor will go bad, and you should check with an ohm meter occasionally, or sometimes even the paint that you use to make the connections with that thing, will just chip away eventually over time.
Yeah. Again, this goes back to as well, do you just do rip track work when there's a failure, or do you institute a periodic check? And again, if the reliability of the railroad is suffering because of a lot of rolling stock problems, then that would seem to prompt one to start a periodic check. If your railroad's largely trouble-free, then just the occasional failure, then just deal with them one at a time.
One of the simplest ways I check my resistors is that on the club's layout, we've got a couple of grade crossings that will trigger the lights and the bells.
Mm-hmm.
You have the resistors. If you got a car that rolls over it and the lights go off, then okay, I better check the resistor on that car.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you for your patience today and your involvement in discussion of these things. I, again, intend to continue with this with, more tight focus on different areas here to help share knowledge from myself and to you guys and to each other and around. Because I think that it's an area where we don't do as well as we might. This basket case car, for example, I said there's the devil's in the details. And a lot of people focus on prototypical details to the detriment. The basket case car here, it had Proto 87 wheel sets in it. Ooh. It had the prototypical downsized couplers. The Katy couplers you get where the coupler head size they're shaped just like the prototype, which means the height of the knuckle is reduced considerably. And so here we had this car that was a piece of junk, but boy, somebody put the Proto 87 wheel sets in it and they put those couplers on there. And it was sort of like,
hey, maybe you got it from a guy who was RPMing.
I guess.
Except don't forget us. We're half the hobby.
Yeah. Well, I would tend to believe he might have been a RPM modeler, except I had to get ladders because pretty much all the ladders on the sides of this car, except one, had been torn off.
Mhm. Whatever. But
Yeah,
that a lot of us are doing this detail because we want to build a model of a prototype car
yep,
as close as we can in the scale we're chosen to do it.
good. And that is a valid and wonderful thing to do.
Mhm.
When cars are operated, I just want to know that whether they're super detailed or not, that they'll behave. And that's my focus here. But to me, it was just an irony of this car because the car was a smoking ruin, but it had the Proto 87 wheels and the smaller couplers on it. And so that was the imbalance that I felt observed with the car. And the weight, remember, the weight was loose and slamming around. So, I'm sorry, Ken, I spoke over you.
Were they true Proto 87 or Code 88?
Uh, Probably Code 88, as I think about it.
Yeah, because Code 88 will operate very well if you have good track, like Payco track and things like that properly set up.
Uh-huh.
But they're a devil if you're using old Code 100 that was badly laid.
Right. Yeah, here is one of them. I'll compare it, put it on the camera here and compare it to okay, stay.
I'd have to, that's too small for me.
Hang on. There. I think you can see, here you have a Code 1,
I don't have a.
you see the difference in the width of the tread?
Common nowadays, so you can actually specify when you get a ready to run car whether you want a Code 88 or Code 110.
Right.
And as they say, if your track is like your track is well laid,
Yeah.
88 would work on it.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Home track.
yeah. Come on, get in there.
And on a big layout for a club, I wouldn't bother with Code 88 wheels.
Right. That is knowing the environment that the piece of rolling stock is running in, then once again helps determine how careful you need to be. I guess in a sense, all this stuff I've been yammering at you poor guys about here this last hour and a half is sort of a for instance, just to throw the ideas out there, and then people take up or use which of them they find useful. And indeed, the layout you're on or you're visiting is going to really come into play. Again, I thank all of you for your patience and your comments and your thoughts on this. I'll be doing more in the future on this, drilling down in more detail on some of the whys and wherefores about different techniques to try to make a car pass the RIP-TAC process, and what sort of things can be done to fix problems that we run into.
Dave, is there a way you could share your form?
The form?
Mhm.
The form here, I can just email to you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Making a note here. All right, before we, does anybody else have stuff they want to share before we wrap up for the day?
Mhm.
Oh, I have just one point. Registration for the Southern Pacific Historical and Technical Society is now open for their October convention in Sparks.
Not too far away.
Mhm.
Let's see. SPRHS, was that it? SPRHTS? That's a long acronym. Yeah, I'm a member, but I don't know if I'll be getting up to Sparks. But
It's cheap, believe me, for registration.
yeah, reasonably priced.
Hey, isn't
Thank you.
Yuki's big boy up in Roseville today?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's where Phil is he went up to catch it. Because of my family responsibilities, I'm limiting my travel, so I'm gonna pass on it this time. But yeah, big machine.
Well, if
I
I
saw
want
some.
a big machine, I'll go see the cab Ford in the museum.
Yeah, that's. I want to take my wife up there just so I can have her stand next to the cab forward. My first wife's cousin, her is it grandfather, was an engineer on the cab forwards over the hill, and I had the privilege of sitting with him and listening to him tell stories. Oh, Joe Squires. Yeah.
I'll hop the Capitol up there. You won't have to drive. Just
Yep, that's right.
nice fun trip on the train.
Any excuse, right?
Yep.
And Larry, once again, apropos of nothing, I want to thank you for all the work you did to put together your clinic
Well,
that you did, because it sort of peripherally ties into the stuff I'm yammering about today, which is having reliable equipment helps make those statistics of reliable delivery to the customers.
you got that right.
Yeah.
Every time you get a bad order car, how many hours does it take you to stop the train and set that car out and put the train back together? Yeah, you're delaying your customer's shipments every time you have to do that.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
The shipments inside those cars.
Yeah. I apologize, sir.
Too. It's the whole train you're delaying.
Yep. I'm just now realizing I didn't follow the comments as well as I should have. Let me check here. Oh, Ken, you make an interesting comment here about sprung trucks for O-scale. In my experience, sprung trucks haven't seemed to be better and sometimes have been worse, particularly where the two side frames are free to do this.
Oh, the cause sprungers were sometimes a devil.
Yeah, the plastic, as long as the truck, a good HO plastic truck has got the, a bit of rock and pivot, it seems like they do just fine. And the springing, I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't even buy their latest version of us motion in the truck because it's trickier than anything to get together and working properly.
Al Malik is
version trucks. HG.
HG. Okay.
Yeah. Only if they have a truck that nobody else makes.
Yep. I actually recently got a big shipment of plastic HO trucks. In my case, I only care about just that it's roller bearing, and I'm not worried about which exact type goes under which exact car. But Eve Model, a German company, has been importing plastic trucks for HO, and they're of good quality. I was quite pleased with them. I have a bunch of them. And so whenever I get one of my cheap junk cars, if the trucks are at all questionable, I throw them away and throw the Eve Model trucks under there. Anybody else have something before we pull the plug here?
Oh, the reason for the bug.
The bug?
Plug.
Oh, there it is.
2022 in Modesto.
All right. We got another one coming up. All right, guys. A pleasure working with you on this today and hearing your comments in particular. Few things I can touch up in the form. And Larry, I will just email you the form as it currently is, and then you can do with it as you need.
Okay, thank you, Dave, and thank you for this clinic. It's great.
All right, we'll be doing more, getting down in the weeds on more of the details, but today was a big overview.
Mhm.
All right, everybody, take care,
All
and
right.
I will catch you down the line.
There you go. Have a great weekend, everyone.
All right, take care and enjoy the cooler weather.
92.
Yeah, it's better than it's
I
been.
know it's 10 degrees cooler, but it's still hot.
It's still hot. I know.
Antioch, you've been boiled.
You
Yep.
got that right.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching this Coast Division e-clinic. More Coast e-clinics can be found on the Coast Division YouTube channel.